Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi will chair the Gaza Peace Summit tomorrow, with 20 world leaders attending, including UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, Italy's Giorgia Meloni and Spain's Pedro Sanchez. Meanwhile, Hamas will miss the formal signing of the Gaza peace deal. A senior Hamas official has confirmed that the hostage release will commence tomorrow morning. Hamas has warned that it will repel any renewed aggression. Meanwhile, over 500,000 Palestinians have returned to Gaza City since the ceasefire has been in effect. Iran has rejected US President Donald Trump's suggestion that it may normalize ties with Israel, calling it wishful thinking. Trump had hinted at Iran possibly joining the Abraham Accords following Israel's peace deals with 4 Muslim-majority countries and the ceasefire in Gaza. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged US President Donald Trump to broker peace in Ukraine, praising his efforts in the Middle East. Zelensky has called on Trump to pressurize Russia to enter into negotiations, especially considering the recent spate of attacks that targeted energy infrastructure. China has accused the United States of double standards after Washington threatened new tariffs. Beijing's Commerce Ministry has urged the US to correct what it terms erroneous practices, defending its decision to impose special port fees on US-linked vessels as a necessary countermeasure. Taliban forces have launched armed reprisals against Pakistani troops along Afghanistan's eastern border after Islamabad conducted airstrikes on Afghan soil. Pakistani officials have confirmed that Pakistan fired light and then heavy artillery at 4 points along the border and shot down 3 Afghan quadcopters. The Trump administration has directed the use of $8 billion in unused research funds to pay troops during the federal shutdown. Trump has ordered U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to ensure that military personnel receive their salaries on the 15th of October. Torrential rains in Mexico have killed at least 41 people and have caused widespread destruction. Flooding, landslides and collapsed roads have impacted 31 states. Hidalgo and Puebla have suffered the worst, with thousands affected. The Mexican military has deployed troops, boats and helicopters in order to assist rescue efforts and distribute aid in isolated communities. All right, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. US President Donald Trump will address the Israeli parliament, that is the Knesset, on the 13th of October, which is tomorrow. The White House has confirmed this, and this announcement comes as dozens of aid trucks carrying food, fuel and medical supplies are heading into Gaza through Egypt's Rafah crossing. Meanwhile, Jordan's King Abdullah will attend the Gaza Peace Summit that is slated to take place tomorrow in Egypt, which will be co-chaired by Donald Trump and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. This will be held in Sharm El-Sheikh with participation from more than 20 world leaders. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Yossi Cooper-Basser, Israeli intelligence and security expert, joining us from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. A high-stakes summit, in fact, is slated to take place tomorrow in Egypt. Apart from that, we're also getting to know that Donald Trump will be addressing the Knesset tomorrow as well. What are your expectations from this summit? We do know that UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and several European leaders will also be present.
Well, we have 2 major expectations. One is that it will help solve the problem in Gaza, and help implement the Trump plan, which calls for the disarmament of Hamas and transferring the control of Gaza into the hands of Palestinian technocrats and an international stabilization force that will help these technocrats function and replace the Hamas terrorists. That's the one thing. And the other, that's more for the wider meeting of the leaders in Cairo, in Egypt tomorrow, is to bring about the conditions that would enable us to normalize our relations with the rest of the Middle Eastern countries that have not yet joined the Abraham Accord. And if this is going to be possible, then this is wonderful. We are, of course, very enthusiastic about hosting President Trump for his contribution to achieving this deal, and moving forward along his plan is exactly what Israel wants. And we highly appreciate his contribution to making it happen.
In fact, we've also seen senior Trump administration officials, including U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and senior advisor Jared Kushner in Tel Aviv yesterday. I wanted to understand from you, what was the reception like on the ground, and what exactly have they stated to reaffirm U.S.'s support for Israel?
Well, Witkoff and Jared Kushner went to what you call the Hostages Square. And they were received with a lot of respect and enthusiasm, I would say, and thankfulness on behalf of the people there, because everybody in Israel is waiting for the hostages to be released tomorrow, and this was done in accordance with the deal that was brokered by the Americans, and mainly by Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and so everybody is very appreciative of what they've done. There was one incident in this, because they chose to go to the Hostage Square, and the Hostage Square is populated mainly by people who are coming from the opposition, who took advantage of the suffering of the hostages in order to promote their political agenda. And when he thanked, Witkoff thanked Prime Minister Netanyahu for his contribution to reaching the deal that allows for the release of the hostages, those opposition supporters were very much against Netanyahu, booed him. So yeah, I think he didn't realize that he's entering something that is inside politics in Israel.
All right, so I request you to stay on with us. We're tracking some other very crucial developments. We're now learning that displaced Palestinians are heading back north through Wadi Gaza 2 days after the ceasefire has come into effect. Families can be seen packing their belongings and making the long journey home, many to neighborhoods that have been reduced to rubble. Let's in fact listen in to what a displaced Gazan has had to say.
يعني أنا راجع وأنا متأكد إنه فيش حياة معدومة حتكون هناك نهائيا. يعني لا حيكون في مية ولا حيكون في حياة، قال لي هنا شوية شوية بدي تيجي المية، هناك حيكون فيش حياة، تكون معدومة نهائيا. إحنا حنبدأ نأسس من أول وجديد، وطبعا فيش دور. إنه نحكي في دور فيش دور يعني. إيش بدنا نسوي؟ مش عارفين إيش بدنا نعمل.
Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Yossi Cooper-Basser. We've been seeing a lot of mixed reactions coming in from Gaza. Some people are elated that they get to go back home, while some are worried about the fact that their homes are no more, and medical treatment is also scarce at the moment. Despite all of this, there is cautious optimism on the ground. Humanitarian aid corridor has once again been reopened. The Rafah crossing will allow a lot of aid trucks to finally get in there. But reconstruction is a long-term process. And many tout that it will take about a decade or so to do this. What are Israel's concerns as far as post-war reconstruction in Gaza is concerned, and Hamas's, remaining mum on the fact that Trump's plan demands disarmament and an international board of peace?
Well, we are totally in favor of reconstruction of Gaza, but provided that the people that are going to be in charge of Gaza are going to look for turning Gaza into a place that lives side by side in peace with Israel, and not a base from which terror attacks are going to be launched in order to wipe Israel off the map and kill as many Jews as possible. That's a precondition for reconstruction, and that's why Hamas has to disarm and relinquish power in Gaza before there's going to be any reconstruction. What is happening now is that we allow the humanitarian aid coming in to make sure that there's enough medical supplies and food and whatever is necessary for day-to-day life. But reconstruction cannot start before there is a fundamental change in the way Gaza is governed, because you spoke about the mixed reactions. While on the one side we have people saying that they want Hamas to do some soul searching and the Palestinians to do some soul searching and realize that 7th of October was a terrible mistake that should not be repeated. While we have these people, we also have a lot of people chanting, let's kill the Jews. And I don't know who is the majority. So we have to change Gaza fundamentally. And as the Trump plan states in its first article, there's got to be a de-radicalization of Gaza before there's going to be reconstruction. Now, all the tools for reconstruction are there, but I don't see yet the tools for de-radicalization of Gaza. And this de-radicalization and reconstruction are going to be long-term processes. It's going to take a long time before they are actually materialized. So we have to curb our enthusiasm about how fast this can happen. I think there's a tension between this understanding and the spirit with which this meeting in Egypt is going to be characterized, because everybody speaks about as if reconstruction is going to happen within 2 days. Mm-hmm. No, and so is the case with the radicalization. It's going to take time. We have to be patient.
All right, sir. With that, I would like to thank you for taking our time, sharing your perspective, your expectations on tomorrow's summit with us as well. Shifting focus away from the Middle East towards Europe, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged US President Donald Trump to broker peace in Ukraine, just as he's done so in the Middle East. He's made this appeal during a phone call and has emphasized that if Trump could stop one war, others could be stopped as well. Zelensky has in fact informed President Trump about Russia's attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, and he's also appreciated his willingness to support Ukraine. Zelensky has added that opportunities were discussed to bolster Ukraine's air defenses, as well as concrete agreements that they are working on to ensure this. Earlier, remember, Russia had launched a major airstrike on the 10th of October that targeted the Ukrainian power grid, causing blackouts across much of the country. Power was restored on the 11th, that is yesterday, to more than 800,000 residents in Kiev. With us on the broadcast is Gilbert Doctorow, International Relations and Russian Affairs expert, joining us from Brussels in Belgium. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We've seen several strikes having taken place. They've wounded 20 people in Kiev, and a child was also killed in Ukraine. As I mentioned earlier, power, meanwhile, has been restored to 800,000 people and the energy grid was targeted. Although the Trump administration's focus in recent weeks has been on Gaza, especially with this landmark peace deal and further negotiations that are slated to take place down the line, do you think that once Gaza is more or less wrapped up, the Trump administration will then focus on tackling the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
I wouldn't say that the Trump administration has lost interest or is not active in the Ukraine-Russia war. Today's issue of the Financial Times, the weekend issue, has a lengthy article detailing how the Trump administration officials have enabled Kiev to strike against major refineries and energy infrastructure of Russia. And they highlight the case of last week's attack on a Ufa refinery, one of the major suppliers of diesel fuel and other fuels within Russia, using guidance information, targeting information, assistance in general from the U.S. officials and U.S. military, probably based in Germany. This is a very important act of war, essentially, against Russia. And so the Trump administration has not been sitting on its hands while it's occupied with Gaza.
Absolutely. We've also, in fact, seen statements made by Melania Trump recently where she stated that she has established a direct line of communication with Russian President Vladimir Putin to ensure that children who are embroiled in the border areas where the war is taking place are safely returned to their families. Now, this has not gone down really well in the United States of America, with people across party lines criticizing Melania Trump. Then what do you think could then be the implications of this, and how could the Ukrainians then receive what Melania Trump is doing?
Well, the context for all this, and it goes back to Alaska and the summit between Trump and Putin, the context for this, the allegations that have made Mr. Putin a war criminal by decision of the International Court of Justice in The Hague. And it all is about precisely children, displaced children. The allegations were made by the Ukrainian side without any substantial support and details that one could imagine several thousand Ukrainian children were taken illegally by Russian forces, were brought into the Russian Federation, where they're being indoctrinated in Russian citizenship. The reality from the perspective of the Russians is that they were saving children whose parents had been killed or who were orphaned or who were simply displaced in a war zone and faced great threat to their lives. They were brought to Russia on a temporary provisional basis, pending the eventual identification of relatives, and some of them have been returned. So Melania's remarks were in the context of this aspect to the information war against Russia being conducted by Kiev. And Mr. Putin was very kind in responding to her letter of concern, and so she has now published this exchange as a demonstration of the closeness in communication. The reality, of course, is that the United States has genuinely pivoted against Russia in the last couple of months, as witnessed by the attack I just mentioned a moment ago, and by the likely delivery of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, one way or another, indirectly probably by Norway.
And we've also seen Russia making some claims that it has wiped out a group of foreign mercenaries fighting for the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kharkov region. Russia claims that the mercenaries consisted of troops from the US, Poland and Colombia. We've also seen some cases emerging from Ukraine itself, with the Ukrainian Defense Forces providing video proof of North Korean troops having been nabbed. There was recently a case of an Indian national surrendering as well, who was initially sentenced to prison in Russia for 7 years on drug charges and was found suddenly surrendering his weapons to the Ukrainians. What do you make of the narrative around foreign fighters being involved in this war?
There's no question that foreign fighters are involved. That's been fairly well documented, even by Western sources. And there's no question, but the North Koreans were present in substantial numbers. But let's remember that their presence was within the boundaries of the Russian Federation. They were not of the traditional boundaries. They were not in the contested territories of eastern Ukraine. They were helping defend Russian territory, which is universally recognized as Russian territory. Now, the mercenaries that are being killed are not just the ones that you're talking about. They are also, well, it's incorrect to call them mercenaries, though in fact they're not identified as being foreign soldiers in foreign armies because they don't wear the uniforms. The Americans are being killed. The French are being killed. They are assisting Ukrainian forces, either giving directions as officers in military operations, or more commonly, in the case of Americans, they are helping to man American-delivered high-technology weapons.
All right, sir. With that, I would like to thank you for taking out time, sharing your analysis with us as far as this war is concerned. With that, viewers, we're shifting our focus to Madagascar. Madagascar's President Andry Rajoelina has stated that an attempt to seize power illegally and by force is underway. This comes after a contingent of soldiers have joined thousands of anti-government protesters in the capital of Antananarivo. Now, Madagascan soldiers from the elite CAPSAT unit, which helped Rajoelina seize power in a coup in 2009, have now joined the protests, calling on security forces to refuse orders to fire on the population, and have also condemned the recent repression by the police. The protests, inspired by Gen Z movements in Kenya and Nepal, started last month over water and electricity shortages, but have escalated into the most serious challenge to President Rajoelina since his 2023 re-election. Demonstrators are demanding Rajoelina's resignation, an apology, and the dissolution of the Senate and Electoral Commission. Listen in to what some of the protesters have had to say.
Le tanora zany zao andray fitenena satria zareo no andrasanay hoe izy zany nitarika dia satria fa nifanarafitra le tadiaviny dia miandry andry zareo hoe inona indray no toy an'ity tolona atao ty.
Pendant qu'on a fait les barrages, on a planté des choses comme ça, droit devant, et à un moment donné, le blindé il est entré et il a piétiné ça quoi, en quelque sorte. Et après ça, ils ont pris juste un petit coin juste pour essayer de se protéger. On s'est battu, ils nous ont lancé des balles réelles, ça c'est très important. Il y a une personne qui a été blessée là-bas au hôpital de Felatan, vous pouvez vérifier par vous-même. Et après ça, ils ont vu que les autres ont réussi à repousser les lacrymogènes, à réussi à esquiver les ballons caoutchouc. À un moment donné, ils ont vu que les militaires aussi venaient de Anousbé. Et après ça, ils se sont dispersés.
Developments coming in from the United States of America. 5 people are recovering in a hospital after a helicopter crashed near Huntington Beach in California. Emergency crews responded at the crash site, which is located between Beach Boulevard and Twin Dolphin. Officials say that the helicopter hit a bridge before going down. 2 people inside the helicopter were pulled from the wreckage, while 3 others on the street were also injured. All in all 5 were transported to a local hospital. The helicopter was part of the Cars and Copters fundraising event that was scheduled for Sunday. Authorities are now investigating the cause of the crash. However, we've not received any updates on the victims' conditions yet. Listen in.
Today around 2 p.m., Huntington Beach Fire and PD and Marine Safety responded to a reported helicopter crash between Beach Boulevard and Twin Dolphin. Units arrived on scene. We found 1 helicopter up against the bridge. 5 individuals are transported to local hospitals in unknown condition. Currently, NTSB is en route. They'll be conducting the investigation. And that's all we have right now. As more information becomes available, it'll get released.
This helicopter was part of the Cars and Copters event that is scheduled to go on tomorrow. We also want to say that the 5 people that were transported to the hospital, they are in an unknown condition right now. But as far as we know, there has been no further changes in those conditions.
More news coming in, this time from North Korea. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has overseen a large military parade displaying its new intercontinental ballistic missile in front of visiting international dignitaries. The parade marks the 80th anniversary of the founding of its ruling Workers' Party. Chinese Premier Li Qiang, Russia's former President Dmitry Medvedev, as well as Vietnam's Communist Party chief To Lam were seen at Kim's side at the parade. At the parade itself, nuclear-armed North Korea has displayed its most advanced Hwasong-20 intercontinental ballistic missile. Kim Jong-un also gave a speech in which he expressed encouragement for North Korean troops in overseas operations. Listen in.
우리 군대는 적을 압도하는 정치 사상적, 군사 기술적 우세로서 방위권에 접근하는 일체의 위협들을 소멸하는 무적의 실체로 계속 진화되어야 하며 도덕과 군기로 승리의 단상을 쌓아가는 정의의 무력으로 끊임없이 강화되어야 합니다.
With that, viewers, it's a wrap on this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World as we dip into a quick short break.